Coming up, Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast is on, and we will be looking at the AIP classic Deadly Prey. So stay tuned for that. Then later this week, Thursday, I'm going to be finishing up the look at the Superman series with Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, and Superman Returns, the Brandon Routh Superman film. So look for that on Thursday. So we'll have that there. And then, in terms of coming up later on the site, we've got to record some more episodes, but once we start recording them, I'm scheduled out for recordings to cover us through the end of October. It's just a matter of once we get those recordings in. But looking to get Rich Haas from DTV Digest on to talk about some Scott Adkins, One More Shot, Chris Kavinsky from Bulletproof, who they recently covered Deadly Prey as well. So if you haven't heard their Deadly Prey episode, you should listen to that as well. It's a lot of fun. They kind of covered it a little bit differently than Todd and I do. So I think, like I said last week, you can't have too much Deadly Prey, right? You can always go for more Deadly Prey. But it was one of those things that kind of worked out where Todd and I had scheduled Deadly Prey, and then I saw that Bulletproof was covering it as well, and it was kind of like we already had it ready to go, so we figured we'd go with it. But definitely listen to that. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, we're going to have Chris on to talk Return to Savage Beach. So a little Sedaris, but also the wrestling aspect with Buff Bagwell, because Chris is great with wrestling, and I think it'll be kind of a fun conversation there. Talk a little NWO Wolfpack. I think Buff Bagwell was in the Wolfpack as well. We've had some resurgence of NWO Wolfpack in the Boston area. Even though I live in Philadelphia, I listen to Boston sports radio, and the general manager of the Patriots, his name is Elliot Wolf. And so one of the radio shows I listen to, Jones and Keefe, whenever they bring up Elliot Wolf, I think they play like the Wolfpack theme song. So it's kind of brought it back a little bit there. So a little resurgent for the NWO Wolfpack there. But yeah, we'll be talking about that when we get that episode, as well as talking some Sedaris. So keep an eye out for that. And then, like I said, October is already scheduled as well. We just got to get the recordings in. So it's going to be a busy September as we record, get all these recordings in for those October. But we got some exciting episodes coming here. And got some interesting, some fun ideas coming up for November as well that we'll be recording in October, so hopefully all that'll come to fruition too. Now in terms of the site, we did get Raw Justice in last week, so movie that hadn't been recorded on the podcast yet, so it's kind of a fresh one there. We're gonna go back for a podcast one on Saturday when we do Cinderella's Revenge, which was the one that we covered in the podcast with screenwriter Tom Joliffe, who wrote that film. It's now on Tubi, so I want to review it while it's on Tubi, get some more word out for people there. When I saw it, it was in the theater here in Philadelphia, so not Philadelphia, in the suburbs, but it was in the theater, and so I think it's been on Tubi for a few weeks now, so good for me to get that review in. But then in 2 weeks, the next review after that is going to be Shotgun, the PM classic, which I believe, according to IMDb, I think it's the third PM film ever made. So I'm trying to think who's in that one, if there's anybody that we would know in it. I think the best name is Paulo Taka. I don't know if you remember, his character actor. I think he's like the one name that we would get other than like Pepin and Merhi and that kind of that early PM crew. What's the writer's name? Kagangas, I think his name is, and then Addison Randall, I think, is involved. Those there's some of those. Was it Charles Kangangas? I hope I'm getting the name right. I'll get it right when I do the review. But we'll look for that in 2 weeks, and then we'll finish off the month with Wanted Man for Dolph Lundgren, because I know his birthday is coming in November, so I want to try to set it up that we can do Showdown at the Grand in November for him. So we'll get Wanted Man out of the way now, which that is one we did cover on the podcast with Mitch from Video Vacuum, who we're looking to have on again in October. We're looking to record that one soon as well, so look out for that too. I think that kind of gets us over the hump. I think that is everything. I did record with John Cross from After Movie Diner recently, so I'm not sure when that episode will be up, but be on the lookout for that. Again, easiest way to get his episodes is just subscribe to his Patreon. That's what I do. So of course, it's gonna be interesting to see myself on video. I think it's the first time that the first episode that I've been on since I've subscribed to his Patreon, so it'll be interesting to see myself on video there, see how I do. I might be hostage video-y. I don't know. The way I've got it sitting there, but we'll see. But again, that's the best way to cut it to get early access to his, but also you get the full video version of it if you watch it through the Patreon. So keep an eye out for that as well. Well, why don't we jump in here? So we're gonna do our theme song, which again, John Cross, After Movie Diner, also miscellaneous plumbing fixtures. That's his musical project or his musical group that he does. He just put out a new album as well. So go to Bandcamp and look for that. I picked it up. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. The album is called Unexpected Schemes. I probably shouldn't bury that lead there, right? So Unexpected Schemes by Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. Again, Bandcamp is the best way to do it. Pop on there, you buy the whole album. You can donate a little bit more if you want. I think $8 is what the suggested price is, and then you can donate more if you want to. But it's a better way for indie artists to get their money, because it's just really hard to make that money on Spotify streams. I think if you get a million. Oh, is it a billion that you need to get like thousands? I don't know. It's you need to get a lot of streams to be able to make any kind of money. Whereas Bandcamp, you get the money directly. So I'm always pushing that. So again, John Cross, Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures, is going to be doing a theme song here in just a minute. Go to Bandcamp and pick up Unexpected Schemes right now. Also pick up some of his other ones. There's a ton of great albums on there. One of my favorites is Truer Crime. That's one that's available. I'm trying to think what else the Donald Pleasance. He did a second Donald Pleasance album, second Pleasancing. I think it's what's called the Pleasancing 2. Really great songs on there. One of my favorite songs of his all time. It was "Follow in Your Father's Footsteps," the first one on the album. But he also does one called "Simpatico," the Columbo song. Talks about Pleasance's appearance on Columbo. Really, really great stuff there. So tons of great albums there. I mean, he has tons of stuff on Bandcamp. So you can go in there, kind of pick out anything. But again, the newest one is Unexpected Scheme, so definitely check that out. All right, well then, speaking of John, we'll have that theme song played, and then when we come back, Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast is on, and we'll be looking at Deadly Prey. All right, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined by very special guest Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. Welcome back, Todd.
Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, we've got an interesting one to discuss here. We've got a good old Deadly Prey.
It's great to go back to the 80s for something here. This I remember seeing ads for this film, back in like browsing through video store magazines and things like that during my teenage years. So.
Wow, that's awesome. So because I didn't come across this movie until when I started doing the site. I think it was Simon Miller of Explosive Action, who has a great YouTube channel showing off his collection. I think he got a Japanese VHS of this, and he ripped a DVD copy and sent it to me all the way from Australia. So that's how, of course, now you can get it on streamers. I think there's Blu-ray versions. It's all over the place now.
Well, the Tubi version is clearly a VHS rip, and that's what I watched. So it's kind of like, you get to experience it the way that you would have experienced it back in what was it, 87 or whatever. But yeah, actually, I actually watched this one. I know we're jumping ahead here. I don't want to do that too much to you, but back in my teenage years, I used to grab this video magazine quite often. I don't remember what the name of it was, but it was one that, where they would highlight video equipment, the cameras, the VCRs that were coming up. And then there were always tons of ads in there and reviews for what was coming out on videotape. And I used to go through there and I would like cut out all the ads for all the movies that were coming out, even the ones I had never heard of before. And I clearly remember cutting this one out because it had this bright green background to the VHS box. I just have a very clear memory of it. Never actually got to watch it until about a year or so ago. This was my second time watching the film. So
excellent. Now was that at the time when VHSs were more available to stores and not really to the general public?
Right. Yeah. So basically, the concept of a sell-through title didn't really exist yet. The idea that you would go and buy a movie on videotape for $25. I mean, that was unheard of. A VHS tape cost you about $100, if I remember correctly. And it wasn't until some of the bigger titles started to go, well, hey, we made enough money at the box office. Let's try and get people to, buy this for their homes. And you would see things like one of the big ones, and in fact, I'm staring right at an ad for it. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, when it first hit VHS, which would have been like late '83, early '84, they launched that as a sell-through title. And I have a tabletop display that I bought from a video store here in Denver when it was closing. For order your copy today, Raiders of the Lost Ark, $39.95.
Wow.
And I mean, that was considered cheap then. And you can tell that this would have been, like I said, late '83, early '84, because in the bottom corner it says coming to a theater near you, May 25th, 1984, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So I love this little tabletop display that I've got here on my desk. So.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, because I remember growing up, like very few people had the only person I knew that had a VHS collection was well, actually, he was my friend, but his mom and my mom actually became better friends, and they're still friends today. But they had HBO, and they had a VCR, and they would tape movies off of
Right.
HBO when they
Hmm.
came out, and so that was how I saw a lot of movies first time. So that was, again, that would have been just before, like you said, around that time when even the VCR itself was kind of expensive at that time because
Yeah.
my family, we would rent it when we would rent movies from the store, but that was the first time I understood that. And I always remember because I remember there was that lawsuit that the major motion picture companies filed against, or they tried to get an injunction saying you can't tape things off
Hmm.
of TV. So I wonder too if that maybe impacted a little bit, where it was like the companies were like, instead of fighting it, why don't we just make our own copies and sell them?
It might have been, yeah. I had a similar experience where my the first person I knew that had a VCR was my grandfather, and he had cable TV because cable back then was, at least in my area, was each town had its own cable system.
Oh yeah.
So like the town next door to mine, they had cable for ages. And I mean, we're talking about, like, I live just past the city limits type of thing. So half a mile from my house, people had cable TV, but we didn't. We didn't get cable TV in my neighborhood until 1986, which that
Wow.
was late in the game. And so my grandfather, who lived a few towns over and had a VCR, he'd tape movies for me, and then we would watch them. So that was cool.
Yeah, yeah, because where I grew up in Maine, we did have it that early because I remember when Nesson, the sports channel, first was launched in the Boston area. My dad was like, "Well, we need cable so I can watch the Red Sox," because they'd moved the Red Sox from the local channel that would play the games to they split the game. So I think it was like half the games would be on the local channel, so the
Yeah.
independent channel TV
Yep.
38, and the other was Nesson. He was like, "Well, no, I need it. I need to do that." So
That's what they did with the White Sox in
yeah,
Chicago. Not the Cubs, though. Of course, the Cubs,
right.
stayed on WGN. But
Yeah, because here in Philadelphia, you get because I think NBC Sports bought up a lot of the local ones, and so the Phillies were playing the White Sox here recently, and the NBC Sports app that I use to watch the Phillies games, when it's in the replay, it was giving me the option of the Chicago one as well, which of course, when if you click on it, it says no, you're not in the area to watch the Chicago one.
Mm.
So that's interesting because that was, yeah, like you said, with the Cubs it would be WGN, but yeah, because the White Sox are on that. I guess what would be like that, and maybe the Bulls would be on that channel, or the
I
the,
think,
the Blackhawks.
yeah, I think it was because, I mean, basically, my memory of Chicago sports in the late '70s, early '80s was that, the Cubs were on WGN and the Sox, and then yeah, I think the Bulls and the Blackhawks would be on channel 44. I mean, way down the dial. And 44, then, they would only do some of the Sox games, and then they, made it to cable. And 44 also at a certain point was where it wasn't cable. I don't know if they had this in your area, but they had a thing where you could buy this tiny little antenna. It wasn't a dish, but it was a different kind of antenna, and would go on your house, and it would bring in this channel called On TV, which was a movie channel. And you'd get this little box. My next door neighbors had this. And you would tune in Chicago to channel 44. And then after like 6 p.m., if you tuned into 44 and you flipped this switch, it would then go to this movie channel. And if you didn't have this little box, if you turned to 44, it was all scrambled. So you'd like sit there watching, and you'd go, oh, I think I saw a little bit of James Bond there. But it was scrambled. So you couldn't really see the picture very clearly.
Oh, that's awesome. So they might have had it in the Boston area. So where I lived is a little bit. We had like some Boston channels, and then we were also some like local New Hampshire ones. Because what we had was, yeah, what's with the cable box? They had the it wasn't on movies. It was like a pay-per-view channel.
Uh-huh.
And if you got the illegal descrambler box from the traffic circle the guy is selling on the back of his truck, it descrambled the pay-per-view channel along with all the other, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, and all those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was a similar thing when pay-per-view came along. With pay-per-view, though, I always remember like you tune into the channel. It was way down on the cable dial. It was like way up there. And like they would show the first 5 minutes or so of the movie, and then it would
Yes.
switch to scrambled because they're trying to hook you in to then like hop on the phone and be like, wait, I gotta see the rest of that movie.
Right, right, exactly. And I remember the cable company on their instructions, they said call for the movie 15 minutes before the movie starts.
Right.
And a lot of times that worked, but I remember one time I called for, actually this would have been later. This would have been like in the late 90s. It was Fear, the Marky Mark movie.
Oh.
I called for that
Reese
one.
Witherspoon, Alyssa
Right.
Milano, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, that whole crew. Yeah, exactly. I called for that one 15 minutes early, and they gave me the porn movie, the softcore porn movie that was on at that time. And I was living at home. I was with my parents. I mean, this was like, the late 90s. I was home for college, and I was like, I called them. I was like, we can't have this on. First off, I don't think my parents would have been as upset about the porn as the fact that it was like $15 to rent the porn.
Of
That would have
course.
been, if that showed up on their cable bill, they would not have been happy. So the woman laughed. She's like, "Oh yeah, we'll take care of it. No worries." And then, I taped Fear and showed it to my friends. We all did Marky Mark's Boston accent for that year at school. Right. Well, yeah, kind of. Actually, this might be kind of a good dovetail, kind of, because I was going to talk a little bit about your show, the Forgotten Filmcast, because, Fear is not quite a forgotten film. I think maybe it could get there soon, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting one. But you did one recently. You did Cuffs with Christian Slater, which I actually saw in the theater. So it was really kind of interesting as listening to you talk about it on that episode, and even just sort of thinking back to it. It was almost like with a lot of the the movies that you do, with them being even 80s or earlier. They're kind of forgotten to me. I may remember commercials for them or something like that, but it was fascinating to have it be a movie that I saw in the theater be a forgotten film.
Yeah, it's strange because I've been doing the show for about 10 years or so. And I mean, I don't have like a hard cutoff when it comes to the dates, but I remember when I started the show that I was kind of like, okay, probably, nothing past the 80s, probably. I don't know if that's gone long enough to be considered forgotten. But I mean, I've been doing the show for many years now, and so now you see things creeping up in there. In fact, I'm trying to think. I might have even at some point done something from the early 2000s already. I mean, as time goes on, the more and more you start to realize those movies that have just kind of lost their foothold on the public pop culture consciousness. And Cuffs is one that I remember it coming out. I never got to see it back in the day. It just never got around to watching it on cable or renting it or whatever. I remember being interested because I certainly was intrigued by what whatever Christian Slater was doing at the time, but just never got around to it. And then as I would like go on my regular trips to like the used VH or not VHS, but the used DVD show store, and trying to find things that I hadn't seen, I would never find copies of Cuffs, and I would just keep looking at different things and realizing, you know what, I think this film is starting to move into the realm of being forgotten. So I saw that I could rent it streaming, and I had a guest who was like, "Oh yeah, let's do Cuffs," and so we did it.
Yeah, it's amazing because, like, a few of the things you pointed out on the episode, like when you mentioned that in Texas it was rated R, but the rest of the country was PG-13.
Yeah,
That definitely was a memory that I had where I was like, oh yeah, this movie's kind of like a hard PG-13, I guess if you call it that. And so,
hmm,
I think that obviously lends itself to being a tonal issue if you're going to, TNT or whatever the cable channels are going to show it. They might be like, for Christian Slater, maybe we'll find some other Christian Slater films to show instead. So you get that issue. I think of my friends when we would get movies at the video store in the 90s. It was one of those things where, as a group, you try to pick out the right movie. Well, I would have been one of the ones saying, Cuffs, you don't really want to bother with Cuffs. And so then other people don't end up seeing it, right? Because it just kind of gets lost to them. So it's
right.
kind of interesting to see how those different pieces are there that, like, like you said, like a Christian Slater movie of that time, it shouldn't have been a forgotten film, but it is. I think it's one of those ones that I think, like you said, a lot of people would look at his IMDb bio and be like, I remember Cuffs being out, but I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah, yeah, and well, and it's one that falls in kind of an odd place for his career because I mean, he's kind of in that in between time from when he's like more of a teen actor to trying to do something that's more adult roles. This is an adult role, but it's kind of, still trying to be, oh, he's young, he's hip, that type of a thing. I mean, at the same time, there's weirdness going on with like, well, how old is he, and how old? We mentioned this specifically on the show. How old is Mila Jovovich? Because I think
Right.
she's only 15. I think when she makes this movie, yet she's playing someone who's supposed to be about 19, 20, 21, and it's just it's odd, it's trying to kind of have the best of both worlds when it comes to capitalizing on Christian Slater's teen popularity, but trying to give him an adult role. So yeah, I mean, I had fun with the movie. It's got its issues for sure, but it was nice to jump back 30 years and finally get a look at it.
Yeah, and do you find, because I know, like, when I was on your show and we did King of the Mountain, but I think Cuffs is another one. Even this movie, when we're going to be talking about this one here, Deadly Prey, that there are these touches from the past that make the movie more endearing. That, like, I think you when I watched Cuffs, I guess I was like 12, 13 or whatever when I saw it in the theater with my friend, and none of those touches matter because all of that stuff is modern at that time, right? So there's no nostalgia or anything like that. Do
Right.
you find that that sort of gives those movies a little bit more of an endearing quality that they might not have had?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, another film that we just did recently, one of the things I really got caught up in was seeing all the stuff from, back at the time when it was made. The film that I'm talking about here is called The Pit, which
Yes.
was from 1981. It's a horror film, very much like what we would call today a regional horror film. I mean, made in Wisconsin, and it's not something where they had really budgets to do sets, costumes, whatever. They were working with what they had. And so watching this movie filmed in, suburban Wisconsin in, the early 80s, I'm looking at the style of the houses, the style of the furniture, the carpet, all this stuff. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I knew people with that carpet, with those dishes, that whole kind of thing. And so, yeah, it is fun when you get to get those little things that kind of take you back in time and remind you of how old you are, I guess.
Right. And I think with like something like the picks, the episode was great. I think I saw that one a while ago because there's just too many things you were talking about were familiar, but I don't know too because there's a lot of movies I think in the late 70s, early 80s had creepy tones, like creepy kids, creepy relationships with babysitters, all that kind of stuff that
Mhm.
I may have been confusing it with another one, but it's like, you see those things that, especially from our modern eyes, that can be off-putting, right? Like, like the way that the kid is around the babysitter and how the babysitter's kind of being, shot and stuff in the movie. that like you see the other things, you're like, oh, these things are great, and it's almost like the things that don't age well. It's a little different. I know recently Supergirl, there were parts of Supergirl that didn't age well. When I was like, like Hart Bachner having a relationship with a teenager, it was like, okay, that's a little too Betty Mardonis, if I can fly, like it was it's too
Oh,
much there. But then
I
you see those other things that are kind of funny.
I love Supergirl. I am unapologetic about that. I knew you were going to be talking about that on an upcoming episode because I follow the show and I know you've been going through the Superman franchise. And Supergirl, I came to that one late too, because everybody said, "Oh, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible," and I just never got to it. And then when I finally watched it, in my adult years, probably going on 20, 25 years ago now, but I was like, this movie is bad, but there's something so darn charming about it. And I think especially what gets me about it is Helen Slater. I mean,
Yes.
this was, if not her first role, it was certainly her first big role. This was her chance, and she gives it everything she's got in that movie. And you've got all these veteran stars around her, Peter O'Toole, Mia Farrow, what's her face, Faye Dunaway, and they're they're chewing up the scenery. You're going, oh my gosh, these people are terrible. But Helen Slater is there in the midst of all of it, giving it everything she's got. And she sells it. I mean, she's Supergirl to me. And like the scene where she first shows up there on Earth, she jumps out of the lake because it's inner space, not outer space. That's weird. But and she starts discovering her powers, she's flying around and discovering all the things she can do. And I'm like, this is just so sweet, and so I admit all the flaws that Supergirl has, but it's Helen Slater that carries me through on that movie. So I said this recently on another podcast. I will always be a fan of Helen Slater as Supergirl, the defender of Popeye's fried chicken franchises everywhere.
Yes, I completely agree with you with that because when I watched it recently, like one of the things, of course, is that when I was watching it for the series of Superman movies, I'm seeing it like very close to having seen Superman 1 and 2, and so
Yeah.
it compared to those movies, that one and number 3 they don't hold up, but on their own they're very different. But I definitely agree with you on the Helen Slater thing because it's just like that character was written so tonally all over the place where it's like 1 minute she's this childlike being who doesn't know what's going on, the next minute she's suddenly like standing up to Faye Dunaway in this very strong way, but she rolls with that kind of unevenness in a way that you wouldn't expect it someone who's new to acting at that point. I mean, like you said, it was like
Yeah.
her first role. It was amazing. Like you said, she is really Supergirl in that sense. I mean, it's not quite the Christopher Reeve where it's like nobody else can play her because I think
Right.
but I also think that the TV show, because I watched the first episode of the TV show to compare it, and I think what the CW, or I guess it was CBS at that time, what they did with Melissa Benoist is they made it very different from the way that that Supergirl, the Helen Slater's was. So you can't really compare them. You can't say like, oh well, it's different enough that I think it worked there. But I agree with you. When I think of Supergirl, I think Helen Slater.
So, just a quick bit of trivia, personal trivia about the TV show, and I've never watched the TV show because I spend all my time watching movies. But and I'm sorry, the actress that plays her again is what's her name?
Oh, Melissa Benoist. I think I'm
Okay,
pronouncing it right. Yeah.
so she's originally from Colorado, from the Denver area here. And I actually saw her before she hit it big in a local theater production of something. I don't remember what it was. It's some kind of fairy tale. It was like Cinderella or Snow White or something like that. But I took my daughter to go see this. And it was done at a local high school down in Castle Rock, Colorado. And like several years later, then my daughter, she always hangs on to the programs and stuff from these things. And so when the Supergirl series came around, she was like, that she was in that production we saw or that ever. I think part of why she made that connection too is she had a friend that was in that production, and so she knew. She was like, her friend was telling her, oh yeah, that girl I acted with one time, she's the new Supergirl and all that. So yep, I saw her back when.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. It's like I bet it, because I talk to friends who go to like those conventions, where you can see actors and get them to sign things. And like I imagine like she would probably lose it if if your daughter had the program and said, "Hey, can you autograph this?" Like she,
Yeah.
because they're so used to like the same stuff every time. Like I know Ty from Muppets who's been on your show as well, and who's on here a lot. He brings all kinds of interesting things like to those things. Like I think he brought Shoot Fighter to Martin Cove, and Martin Cove just loved it. He was like showing his son, like, "Oh yeah, look what I did here," but during the right after Karate Kid. So yeah, I would imagine she would lose it.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, why don't we get stuck in here on Deadly Prey? This movie it's interesting. I think it has that reputation as being in the realm of like a samurai cop or Miami Connection, one of those kinds of movies. You said you saw it a year ago, didn't you? You saw it more recently. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, it's one of those movies that you just kind of have to kind of roll with it. I mean, going in, it's not going to be this great movie. Going into that it's probably going to be one that is going to be ripping off a lot of other stuff. It's going to be capitalizing on something else that was very successful. And here, we're basically getting, our discount Rambo type of a thing going on. There's definitely moments here that jump out as being fresh out of First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2. So it's a movie that you know when you go into it, this is not going to be any kind of an earth-shattering movie watching experience, but there's probably going to be some things here and there that are going to be enjoyable. Maybe not in the way the filmmakers intended, because there are things that you're probably going, well, that was dumb, or what's up with that, and so you're kind of delighted by the things that are ridiculous about it. So that's the kind of movie we're dealing with here.
For sure. So this was my second viewing as well, because I had only saw it that first time when I did my review for the site, and then I saw it for our discussion here. Did you think this second time around, there were a couple moments in the movie where I thought maybe the filmmakers were more self-aware than I realized initially. Like when you have the guy who gets the grenade down his pants and he blows up, and then a second later you see the smoking empty boots.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, right. Or the like when the main character, when Danton is going through his gun collection, or his arsenal, and he gets like the wrapped up dynamite from like Looney Tunes, or something like that that the Coyote would get from Acme to try to blow up the Roadrunner. It kind of felt like I wonder if they're more in on the joke than I thought.
It could be. It could be. I mean, there are something that I'm kind of, I don't want to spoil too much here early on, but there's especially a moment at the end, which I won't reveal yet. I'll let you do that in due time, where we're kind of battling one of the main baddies in the finale of the movie.
Yes.
And, something happens that you just go, okay, am I really supposed to take this seriously, or are they just going, yeah, let's kind of have fun with the ridiculousness of this kind of Rambo concept?
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very something you would expect out of like a Monty Python sketch, I think. Yeah. For their
Exactly.
movies.
Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, well, why don't we'll get stuck in here. And just to give people a heads up, we're probably gonna go at slightly broad strokes, because this movie does get a little repetitive. It's certain points where it's kind of just it's just Danton in like it reminded me, I don't know if you think if you had this sense of like the old Three Stooges shorts where they'd be in a haunted mansion and somebody would be in a gorilla costume bumping everybody off. It kind of felt like that.
I love me some Stooges, and especially when there's a fake gorilla involved. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same thing when I was kind of going through and trying to put down some notes. I was like, I mean, we have the setup and all that, and there's maybe a monkey wrench or two that gets thrown into it, but for the most part, this film is Danton's ducking around the forest and knocking off the mercenaries.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit bloodier. It's not like in the Three Stooges where people just wake up like tied up in a closet or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd see like the two, like Larry and Moe might be sitting together, and the gorilla comes up behind and knocks their heads together, right? And then they, like usually it's Shemp who like, right, or Shemp or Curly, who the gorilla would like just miss every time, and they didn't know what was going on, and eventually they'd stumble upon everybody.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you mentioned Shemp, because for some reason when you mentioned gorillas and Three Stooges shorts, Shemp was the first image that came to my mind. I've got to admit, I'm not sure. I mean, I could just be imagining how many times Shemp was interacting with a gorilla. I have the full set of Three Stooges, and I'm still in the curly years working my way through. I haven't gotten to Shemp yet. So I mean, I've seen them all tons of times when I was a kid, but I am doing a big rewatch because I mean, it's the Stooges. I got to do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So my wife and I would watch. I don't know if MeTV still does, like they used to do like between 7 and 8 before Svengoolie was on. They would do like an hour of the Stooges, and it's amazing. I guess it shouldn't be amazing that they all hold up so well, but it's almost like being an adult. I appreciate them even more than I did as a kid. I don't know about
Oh
you.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, they're geniuses. I love
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, it's always a fan because I think I see. I know you're a fan of our gang, and I think where I was growing up, it was like Sunday mornings. It would be our gang and then Stooges. That's what they would do, and then sometimes you get like the old Batman or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned MeTV. I mean, MeTV is based out of Chicago. It's
Mm.
Weigel Broadcasting, I think, is who owns that or started it. Tim Weigel was the sportscaster on Channel 7 in Chicago when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
But a lot of the things I don't watch a lot of broadcast TV, but like MeTV is often what's on when I would go and visit my parents, because my dad would just sit there in front of MeTV, and a lot of what is on MeTV is essentially what was Channel 32 Chicago in the late 70s, early 80s. Svengoolie, that originated on Channel 32 Chicago. Channel 32 showed the Stooges, the Rascals, and a lot of those old shows that they rerun there on MeTV were staples of Channel 32 Chicago. So
That sounds right. I think I'd read that because one of the things about Svengoolie that we discovered was because he would talk about Berwyn, and
yep.
there's a
I
Berwyn.
was actually born in Berwyn, so
Oh, you were? Oh,
yeah.
excellent. Excellent. Yeah, because there's one in Pennsylvania just outside of Philly as well. It's a Philly suburb of Berwyn. So we were like, is this show taking place in Philly? And then we, I think there was a few other tells that it was Illinois. And we're like, okay. I think maybe there was the address or something on one of the old, because he does like the flashbacks of the older episodes. And it's like, okay. So yeah, so it's kind of funny how that, in America, there's like so many place names are the same. And so for a second, we were like, oh, is that here? But then we realized that was Illinois.
Berwyn. Yeah,
Right.
that's what they
Yeah.
always say on Svengoolie.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah. So yeah, I guess with Deadly Prey, so that's eventually where we get to, is we get to this sort of bumping off, we get to that point with Danton sort of, yeah, as the gorilla in the haunted house, taking out the mercenaries in a much more bloody fashion. But the first scene we have is we start with a man running for his life in the woods, and he's kind of schlubby with his shirt ripped and everything, and he's kind of going. And then we see this sort of rat, and they're supposed to be mercenaries. They're supposed to look like a serious group of killers, but it seems like every shot we get of them running, they're kind of bubbling through the forest here. And one of the things I caught here, and again, this was before I thought the movie was more self-aware. I don't know, when they finally corner this guy and they go to kill him, he screams for his life. And at one of the
Don't
points, there's
kill
like,
me! Don't kill me! No,
yes,
don't kill me! Yeah.
exactly. Did you notice that he smiled on the last "Don't kill me"? He was
I
he was
didn't
like
know.
trying to not smile, and I think I don't know if it was one of those deals where it's like we just got to get the take, we got to and get out of here, or if it was one of those deals where like they shot it and then they looked at it after, like that's the take we got, we got to go with it, or maybe they just didn't care.
Yeah, the more you're talking about the self-awareness here, I mean, you may have a case there with that. I mean, because that delivery of the don't kill me is so over the top. And it actually, the more I'm thinking about it now, I mean, not to jump ahead, but there's a moment later on here too, where one of the mercenaries is going to talk about the top guy, Hogan, who we'll get to in a minute here. But he delivers a line because he's kind of telling him, everybody's dead, man. That that type of thing. And I'm going, you're doing Hicks from Alien. Oh my gosh, and which makes sense for when this movie came out. This is 87, Aliens is 86. So I mean, maybe you've got something there that they are kind of a little self-aware as they're making this.
Yeah, because when I saw that, I was like, oh man, he just smiled in that take, and that's like it was like a vague smile. Like it's not like so, but it was like enough where it was like I could tell he was having trouble delivering that line without
Mm.
laughing, and he that was the take that they got for it. But yeah, and then we also before the guy gets killed, he actually knocks one of the mercenaries in the head with a rock, and the rest of the mercenaries come and find that guy. And we find out that if you screw up when you're trying to kill the businessman or whoever who's running in this dangerous game style thing, if you screw up, the price is your life. You die as well. Which I that's I feel like if I'm joining a mercenary group, I guess that's the reality. I would think maybe just a termination, maybe with a severance package or something. But that's apparently what you get.
Well, and also this is where we're introduced to not our big bad, but he's kind of
Right.
like the main henchman type of
Yes.
guy. And I mean, like almost nobody has names here. This is one of the big problems with the movie is that there's like very little character development at all, and especially
Right.
when we're dealing with all these mercenaries. They don't have names, they barely have faces, but this guy we see come out a lot, and I just call him Sunglasses Dude
Right.
because I don't think we actually ever hear his name. But with the Sunglasses Dude, like every shot where it's like a medium or close up of him, they frame it in such a way so that you can see something reflected in the sunglasses. And in this case, it's the don't kill me guy. And then
Right.
of course, then the guy, the mercenary who fell down on the job and he ends up shooting him as well. But it's kind of like the first time you see it, you go, all right, well, the filmmakers are trying here. I guess they're trying to put a little style in. We're going to see, something reflected in the sunglasses there. But then they keep doing it over and over and over
Yes.
again. And you're like, okay, guys, this is
Right.
this has run its course.
Exactly. Now, I found out that that character's name was Thornton because I always watch the movies with the subtitles or the captions. And so when he would talk off screen, they would say Thornton colon. And
Okay.
yeah, so that's how I figured that one out. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, because they're setting him up to be. We find out right that they're setting him up to be essentially like the Vernon Wells from Commando, or
Yeah, or he's Carl from Die Hard, the
right.
Alexander Goodenough character. He's the main henchman.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're expecting a big fight between these two at the end here. But yeah, we get this sense that this mercenary group is bad. And so they go back, they talk to General Hogan or Colonel Hogan
Colonel
and
Hogan, which I
right,
couldn't I couldn't hear that name without thinking Hogan's Heroes, of
right,
course, because that's
exactly.
Colonel Hogan in
Right.
that.
Which again, maybe that's another area where maybe this is more self-aware because right because they're like, he's like you'll address me as Colonel Hogan when they have some new recruits later. But yeah, he says, go out and get me another runner. And we find out that the whole deal is that these mercenaries, they train by kidnapping somebody off the streets of like suburban Los Angeles. They bring them to this area out, east of that area and in the woods, and they just like let them loose, and then the mercenaries hunt them down and kill them. Which it doesn't seem like that's great training when you consider the fact that like the person that's running is like kind of all beaten up and disheveled with no shoes and stuff like that, whereas the
Right.
mercenaries are fully armed with grenades and guns and all that. It doesn't seem like I feel like whatever the mercenaries are going to encounter in the field, they're not going to just be guys who are with ripped clothing and no weapons. They're going to actually be fully armed as well.
Well, and that's the thing. This guy that we see as the first runner at the beginning of the movie, I mean, like, how carefully did they choose this guy? Because, like you said, he's a bit schlubby, bit heavy set. Doesn't seem like he would be the best adversary here. It just seems like a random choice.
Yes, exactly. So they're instructed like, hey, go out and Hogan instructs them to go out and find a new runner, but make sure he's tough, make sure he's bad. Which again doesn't make any sense that if they had trouble with the schlubby guy, why do you want somebody? But I guess they, yeah, get somebody who's a little bit rougher, a little bit tougher, and so that's their instructions. So
We also got to mention about Hogan here.
Yeah.
like we also see a little bit of him. I don't know if you'd call it a job interview or orientation or whatever, but he's got these new recruits
Oh, that
that
happens in this scene. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
and they're like going through with what he's like, well, why are you here, what do you want in this unit and all that, and basically all of them say it's for the money, so, which is a little weird, and he gives them this whole speech, basically telling them how nasty they are and how bad this group of mercenaries is, and he does this like, we ain't the Navy, and we ain't the Army, we ain't the Marine Corps, we're tougher than all of them and all that. But you're kind of going, okay, well, you're not the Army, you're not the Navy, what are you exactly? They never really explain what this whole operation is. It's just these random guys out in the woods, so it's a little weird. And Hogan, just, I don't know. I mean, he's full of himself, of course. I got a kick out of the fact that he's got just like random grenades sitting on his desk.
Right.
I guess he
Just in
uses
case you
them as
need one.
paperweights or something like
Right,
that. I don't know.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
he's got one of those terrible metal desks. Do you
Hmm.
remember those things? It's like what the shop teacher in high school always had.
Yes.
They weighed like a ton, and anytime you opened the drawer, they made this terrible creaking noise.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes. I remember when I went to UMaine because I was an anthropology major. Of course, that department did not have a lot of money, and so they had a lot of those kinds. Like when you go into the classes that they, for those, a lot of times the professor was standing behind one of those kinds of desks because they hadn't replaced them since like the 1960s.
right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, the guy who says that he's in it for fun is William Zip or Bill Zip. And he is like known for these AIP, Action International Pictures movies that are, directed by the guy who did this, David Pryor. And, David Winters is the producer. And he's kind of like our hero, Ted Pryor, in the sense that he's like, he stars in the movies, but he also does all kinds of other stuff. Like he's,
Mm.
building sets and, handling what, like I don't know if in this movie I don't know if he had a lot of credits, but you'll see some if you watch more of these kinds of movies, you'll see his name come up with different credits and stuff like that. So yeah, so yeah, fans of these Action International Pictures, they'll know Bill Zip when you see him, it's like, oh, it's Bill Zip or William Zip. So yeah, an interesting character.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just looked him up, and I can see. I go, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Okay.
Yes, yeah, he's in a bunch of these. Yeah,
We we
that's right.
should
So
all
oh,
we
go
should
ahead.
also mention too. There's one lady,
Hmm.
in the group of mercenaries, which again, I mean, this makes me think of some stuff we talked about, like when we talked about Cracker Jack 2 and all that, because the bad guy has, a squeeze, a
Yes.
lady that's a part of the crew. All the rest of the bad guys are men, but there's always one lady, and there's usually some romantic entanglement there going on, and she's basically doing the whole kind of normal thing we see. She's got the really short shorts. She's got the crop top. The whole works there.
Right. And the thing, right, and about her, of course, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead here because I think we get our first introduction to New York Seltzer in the first scene that we where Dan and his wife are in the
Yeah.
kitchen. But later, she steals Hogan's having he's drinking a root beer New York Seltzer, and
Hmm.
she steals it from him. So that was something I don't know if where you were in Denver, if it tried to make a comeback in about 5 or 6 years ago, and then here in Philly they instituted a sugary beverage tax, and I think it priced them out of the market.
I remember seeing those around. I'm trying to remember. They're like, I want to say there was some kind of a fast food establishment where that was all what they always had there. It wasn't Subway, but I was like, is that a sandwich shop of some sort or
Oh,
something that
could be.
always had that? I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I in the '80s, I remember my family would get, or I'd go to like parties or something, and there would always be like, different sodas from the grocery store, and then there might be like a pallet of New York seltzers, especially the root beer one.
Right.
That one I really remember.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
kind of, you had those, you had Snapple, it was all in that same era.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a blast from the past, and I saw in the credits that they actually were sponsored, or I guess I don't know if they got money to because I'd heard from another. I remember seeing another director who was a low budget director who he thought he was going to get sponsored by Red Bull, and he found out that no, Red Bull was just providing Red Bulls for them to for free. They were just getting cases of Red Bull, no money. He was expecting like an infusion of cash when they were making the movie for that. So I don't know if this movie got money from New York Seltzer, or if it was just you just get drinks, and so
I
everybody could drink those.
I figured there must have been some kind of arrangement because there is that one shot in that scene where she takes that from him, where it's like the whole scene begins with a close up of the seltzer bottle.
With
So
the New York Seltzer, exactly. Yeah. Now another '80s fixture that we get here is when we first meet Danton, while the baddies are out canvassing his neighborhood to try to find another runner. We meet Danton in bed, and it's a water
a
bed.
water bed.
And what's great is like his girlfriend, played by Suzanne Terra, or wife, his wife, played by Suzanne. She's trying to wake him up out of bed, and she's like hitting him with a pillow. And every time she hits him, the waterbed really goes. It's beautiful.
I always thought, I don't know if I could sleep on a waterbed. I think I'd get seasick. But yeah, it's well, and that whole scene is just weird to start with because it's like, I mean, how many other movies where you've got, the big action hero, the muscular guy, your Arnold type, your Rambo type, whatever, that we introduce him by, first of all, he's sleeping in a waterbed and he's like acting like some kind of a, lazy teenager that doesn't want to get out of bed. She's like, come on, it's time to get up. You're going to be late for work. He's just going, he doesn't even say anything. He just groans. I'm like, this is like my 22-year-old son trying to get him out of bed, and
Exactly.
and it's like I'm supposed to believe this is some guy that is this ultra fighter type of guy and all that, but our introduction to him is spoiled kid who doesn't want to get out of bed.
Right, exactly. And then what he does in the next scene, when he's in the kitchen while his wife's making breakfast, she's like, "You got to take the trash out," and he's like, "Okay, all right, I'll take the trash." And even then he's like kind of like half asleep, and he's kind of his hair's a mess, and it like you said, it's almost like again like like the 22-year-old son, where it's like, okay, you're up now, I need you to do this. And it's like, all right, I'll
Well,
go.
and the kitchen doesn't help his image either. I mean, oh my goodness. I realize this is, the mid 80s or whatever.
Right.
But the style of this kitchen, the curtains with the fringe and all that, you're going, what man's man lets that be what the way his house is decorated? I mean, that is terrible.
Yeah, it looked like the episode of like the family drama TV show from that time where like one of the kids goes to like the elderly neighbor to help them with stuff, and
Uh-huh.
they learn all this history about the elderly neighbor that's like this really fantastic thing. But that's the kitchen, right? Where maybe she's pulling the cookies out of the oven or something.
It's the kitchen that is, I mean, we talk about, earlier, these movies that take us back in time and we see the styles of what this is, again, this is 87, but that kitchen, you're going, that kitchen is like 74. It's, this thing needs to be remodeled, people.
Yes. Yeah, I mean it looks like if or maybe an episode of Emergency, right, where like a elderly lady falls, right? And then there's, DeSoto and going in there trying to revive her and taking the call from the doctor at the the hospital. It's like you could see it like almost with that kind of I mean, I guess this movie was more of '80s film stock, but like you could almost see like that
Mhm.
kind of '70s TV stock that the kitchen looking better in that scenario.
Right. I mean, they're clearly working with what they had, I mean,
Right.
it's not, they're not putting any money into sets of props and things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you talking about the mercenaries going around the neighborhood looking. I mean, do you see the massive crack in the windshield? They're filming outside the windshield,
Right.
the driver's point of view, and there's a spider web looking crack in the dang thing.
Right, exactly. Which is interesting because you'd think with all the money that they seem to have from Troy, so we find out that Troy Donahue is funding this situation later, but with all the money, you'd think that it'd be like, okay, but you wonder if maybe that's, maybe I could see Colonel Hogan as the type to funnel more money to himself than to be fixing up windshields on vans.
There wasn't enough New York Seltzer money coming in to fix the windshield, I guess.
Right, exactly. Which might tell tell us that actually maybe it wasn't money, right? Maybe it was just beverages, right? That's probably they thought they were going to get money. It was probably like, Pryor's like telling them like, yeah, well, or David Winter from West Side Story, who produces a lot of these movies. He was a producer on this, right? Maybe he was like, yeah, when we get that New York Seltzer money, we'll fix up that windshield, and it's like, all right, well, let's do the shots now, so just so we can kind of get it in there, and then we can always replace it later with the nice windshield. Okay, and then it's like, guys, I got some bad news. Turns out it wasn't money from New York Seltzer. It was just bottles of
Yeah.
soda. That's all we got. Really? It's like, well, what
The
are we gonna
windshield's
do?
not happening, man.
Right, exactly. So that's it. They just went with that shot. Now, the other thing, no, so we've already established that Ted Pryor as Danton, he doesn't like to get out of bed. He's sleeping in a water bed. The kitchen is like from 1974. He's angry about having to go, or not angry, but he's kind of more jokingly, like playfully with his wife about having to take the trash out. And when he brings the trash down, that's when the baddies show up with their van. They lure him in with the whole "I need directions," which of course, everybody wants to give directions, right? Like you always want, especially a guy like, yeah, I'll point out where you got to go. I think the only one that would have worked better is from like Curb Your Enthusiasm with the pickle, right? Like the pickle jar. Can you help me with this pickle jar? And he goes and helps him and he gets hit over there.
He actually falls victim to like the thing that we were told in instructional films when we were 5 years old not to fall victim. It's like, hey, come here, I gotta
Right.
ask you something.
Yes.
Do you know where this house is? Do you know where this street is? I mean, it's literally what we saw in those Stranger Danger movies.
Right, exactly. And he, like you said, he falls for it. But again, we're supposed to believe that this guy is going to be, like the fly in the ointment for this mercenary group, and he gets taken out pretty easily. I mean, they hit him in
Yeah.
the back of the head with a pipe, throw him in the van. The
I mean,
wife,
sunglasses guy does sneak up behind him,
yes,
but I mean, still,
yeah, it seemed quick, but then also too, look, the wife comes out and catches it just in time. And so we figure she's probably going to call the police, but we find out later that that's not the case. She just sees her husband get taken off in a van, and later we find out that she calls in her dad, Cameron Mitchell, who is a was on the force for 30 years. They let us know every time he says anything that he was on the force for 30 years, just in case we need that plot exposition. But
well, and I mean, I don't want to jump ahead too far. Maybe this is as good a place as any, because right in
yeah,
this kind of section of the film is where we get our first exposure to the two quote unquote names of this movie.
right,
Because
yes.
a movie like this, they're gonna try to bring in some fading stars from previous eras to give themselves a little bit of credibility, and so we get, like say, Cameron Mitchell as the wife's dad, who doesn't actually even have a name. He's just Jamie's father.
Jamie's father,
You
yes.
know, and Troy Donahue as the guy that is, the business suit wearing guy that's funding this whole mercenary operation. And both of them are cases where you're going, yep, you guys are just taking any job nowadays, aren't you?
Yeah, and they appear in so many of these movies from this time. It's like essentially like late 80s. I think Cameron Mitchell kind of into the early 90s was a little bit less so because he was older. But Troy Donahue, he definitely, because I guess Troy Donahue was born in 35, which I didn't realize. Which is probably not fair to him that I thought he was older than that. He really gives off sort of like the late John Schneider career vibes. And I guess it kind of makes sense, right? That if you were John Schneider and you were trying to find movies like this late in your career, you do the religious movies, I guess, because
Mm.
those are going to pay you. Whereas this time these movies paid better than religious movies, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's both these characters are weird in terms of, again, we don't get very much of what they're all about and what they're kind of offering here. I mean, Donahue, we just know by the fact that he's wearing a fancy suit that he's, a guy that's got money, and Hogan is clearly a bit intimidated by him. He's the one that's holding the purse strings and all that. So, he's important in some way. But I mean, he's like a totem pole in this. He's just wooden as anything. And and then Mitchell, he's again doesn't even have a name, just Jamie's father, and we know he's an ex-cop. He says stuff about, oh, I'll call some of my buddies. They owe me some favors, whatever. But as things progress, we don't see any other cops. We don't see, he goes at it all on his own, and it's the one scene with him and the daughter where he's trying to essentially interrogate her, grill her for information about what she saw, the van, the license plate number, all that kind of stuff, is one of the most awkward dialogue scenes I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he's and it also looks like they don't have a script that they're working with, where he's just kind of they know they've got to get the license plate number out and kind of make it up as you go along. And he's like, did you see the van? I don't know the mega van. Did you see the color of the van? Oh, it's a green van. Okay. Did you see the license plate? This is very important. Did you see the license plate? It was, I remember a 2 and a 4, and he's repeating. I remember 2 is a 2, a 4, 4, 7, 7. Are you sure? Are you sure? No, it was 427, 427. Jamie, are you positive? Are you positive? 427. It's just, it's painful to watch.
It is. It is. And I guess from a budget standpoint, they were like, well, we don't call don't call the cops because you gotta, have a police precinct set and all that stuff. I don't know if maybe that's the idea.
Oh,
but
I'm sure.
It was it was so weird how you're like, like you said, like she describes the color of it. She's like, well, it's green. Well, what kind of green? Was it a light green? No, it was like a weird kind of green.
Army green.
Army green. Okay, army green. He's like, like you said, he's like repeating every line that she says, and then it's like he's giving us his, well, hey, 30 years in the force, I got to know someone there, and it's like, who says that, right? They're just gonna say, I got to know somebody back in the force, right? It's like your daughter knows you spent 30 years in the force, but it's like, no. His dialogue is also going to give us plot exposition and tell us who he is. And it's like, oh, all right, okay. And
I want to say too, I mean, the awkwardness of the scene, I actually don't fault the actress that plays Jamie at all in this. I mean, I don't remember her name.
Suzanne Tara.
Okay, so yeah. She's not that bad throughout this whole thing. I mean, there's parts of what she delivers as this movie goes that made me think of like a Brittany Murphy. Yes. There's promise there, but what Cameron Mitchell's doing in the scene just throws the whole thing off. Right. So I mean, she had promise, but he's kind of derailing the whole thing.
Right, exactly. You feel like he's almost like Marlon Brandoing it, like thinking of Superman, right? Where he's just just showing up and talking over lights out. Now, I looked up Suzanne Tara on IMDb because I was curious about her. I thought I recognized her, but nothing that I saw rang any bells. But she did the Ferris Bueller's Day Off TV series. I don't know if you remember that lasted like a season.
Jennifer Aniston played the Jennifer Grey role in that thing.
Yes. Yeah, and I had completely, because I was thinking, I thought the show had Nancy Valen in it, but that was another show that aired at the same night called Hull High, which I had no clue about Hull High. So I guess in my mind, I merged the two in my brain because I could not remember a show called Hull High. But I guess like NBC was doing like a night of these shows of like teen comedy kind of things.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember who was the other girl. Oh, I'm looking it up here. It was Amy Dolan. Was the daughter. Was the oh shoot, what's her name?
the Mia or Sloan, the Sloan character. I was gonna say Mia, but Mia's the actress's name.
Mia Sara. Yeah, I was trying to remember her name, but yeah, that show came and went. I mean, Charlie Schlatter played Ferris Bueller.
Right. Yes. It was one of those ones that I remember. That time in the fall. It's a thing that any kids listening right now, you probably don't know how this worked back then. But it was like one of those deals where in the summer you would get the TV guide that would tell you all the new shows that were coming in the fall, and it was always exciting. It's like, okay, there's new shows, and then of course new seasons of shows we really liked. Like a Cheers or something like that. But I remember watching the very first episode of this and being like, I don't think I'm going to watch any more episodes of this. I don't know.
I remember it aired on Monday nights, and I had something else that was on Monday nights, so I never really got to see it. But it came way too late. I mean, the movie's 86. The TV series was 1990. It's kind of like, you're 3 years too late doing a Ferris Bueller TV series. you
Yeah.
know.
The funny thing is that Fox ended up having success with their own version of it with Parker Lewis. That,
Now, Parker
uh,
Lewis was a decent show.
yeah, yeah. It's like they took the concept of it, but it was divorced enough from, it was like the basic concept, but they did enough creative stuff with it. And Fox at that time had a lot of interesting shows. They allowed a lot of interesting creativity with some of those shows.
you, Fox was the place where stuff that was just too out there
Yeah,
for the networks. I mean, back then Fox was still just 2 nights a week. I think it
right,
was it was Saturday and Sunday nights. Their first branching off to another night was Thursdays when they moved The
right.
Simpsons to compete with Cosby. But
Yes.
you were getting those shows like Herman's Head is the one I always remember, which it's like no other network would dare touch something that weird. But I liked Herman's Head. I thought it was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, that was a good one. And of course, I mean, Married with Children, that was like the ultimate anti-Cosby show that they had on Sunday nights as well. That was always a fun one.
Hmm.
Yeah, which of course took place in the Chicago area. I never realized that, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I remember when The Simpsons, when they moved it to Thursdays to take on Cosby, I remember like they had like quotes from Cosby about how Bart Simpson was a punk and all this stuff, and
Right.
it was
Yeah.
like it was this big upstart move from Fox. I mean, they did a lot of moves like that. I remember when they got the NFL from CBS, that was like their big move that
Hmm.
they made. But they were, yeah, it's kind of funny because we kind of know Fox as a different thing now, but that late 80s period when they were first coming out of the gate as a a challenge to the three major networks. It was an interesting time.
When they first started, I mean, again, it was only Saturdays and Sundays, and the only show out of their first run, which I can't hardly remember any of those shows, but Married with Children was the only one that lasted, and that was even they were kind of throwing a bone to the show because it wasn't doing that well in the ratings, but they were like, this is the one that we think's got legs, so we're going to keep it going. But they had other stuff like I remember there was a show called Werewolf that came and went really
Yes.
quickly on that first run of Fox shows. Um, but yeah, I mean, look at them now. They, the little engine that could. So
Yes. Well, and of course, they own Tubi, and so we watched movies on Tubi. You get commercials for things like, trivia with balls, which yeah, so it's like very different from what they were doing back then. Yeah. Well, I guess we should get to the point where get into Danton, starting to knock off mercenaries. So he's at the camp. They've taken his shirt off, his stuff. He's just got his shorts on, and he's
cut
standing
off,
there.
very
His,
short cutoffs.
yeah, yeah, I think that you can see the pockets underneath them at
Yeah.
certain points. So yeah, he's definitely there. I mean, he's ripped. He's ready to go. And they say to him like, yeah, the Thornton, the second in command baddie, he has a knife up to his throat. And he's like, you got to go out there and run for your life. And he's like, I'm gonna kill all of you. And so we get our first like real breathy tone of him speaking because, like you said earlier, he's just a kind of a disheveled high school kid with his lines and everything. But now he's the killer, right? He's the Rambo guy, and he runs out into the forest, and then the guys start chasing after him, and he just starts, hiding behind trees and grabbing them from behind, pulling them off. He starts putting grass on him to, I guess, to camouflage him, which looks kind of funny. It's almost like Swamp Thing, like where he's starting to like to develop foliage or something. But at one point, he captures one of the guys and he interrogates him. And he says, "I'll let you live if you answer my questions." And that's when he finds out that Hogan is running this thing and he knows Hogan.
Hmm.
And then the guy goes, "I just started today." And he's like, "Bad timing," and stabs him. And so we know we're kind of up against here. And
That's one of the few of his, kind of little quirky lines that actually kind of works.
yeah,
There's several moments here where they try to do those Stallone style, Arnold style little lines, before dispatching with one of the bad guys, and a bunch of them are just basically "I'm going to kill you" type of a
right.
thing, and it's
Yeah.
like you couldn't come up with anything more.
Right. Yeah, and it's like he'll just like stab him in the stomach or something like that. And but I mean he starts setting up traps. He's like hiding in the grass and stuff like that. And so we think, okay, well, this is gonna be big. And at a certain point, they're like they bring in Hogan, they let him know what's going on, and they all go out. They all run out to go after him. And this is another one of those kind of ragtag, like they're all dressed in military fatigues, and even Sybil, the woman in the group, she's running out there with a weapon as well. And they start, and he sees the kills, and Hogan is able to, I guess through forensics of just like seeing how people were killed, recognizes his own kill pattern that
Yeah.
he trained Danton with, and he's like, it's got to be this Danton guy, and when he realizes it's the Danton guy, first he says, okay, he's trying to lure us into the forest at dark so that we all get picked off in the middle of the night. So let's back off. And then he also gets this crazy, grinchy idea that he doesn't tell us about yet, that he's going to recruit Danton to be one of his mercenaries because he feels like these mercenaries aren't that good, and I need another guy. And that's also right where we get the New York Seltzer scene, right? Is when Hogan is complaining about how, I can't train these recruits, and Don's or Sybil's like, no. You did it with Danton. You can do it with the other ones, and they're sharing a New
Mhm.
York Seltzer root beer while they're having that conversation. Um, but
And I
yeah,
think this is also where the guy comes in with one of those lines, like I said, that was kind of like Bill Paxton and Aliens, like, we're not hunting him, he's hunting us,
that's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's when Hogan makes the decision to like pull everybody back and let's get out of there. And so Pryor he's there at night, and he he has to eat something if he's going to make it through the night. And well, the funny thing is, so with the eating of the worms, this reminded me when I was in Little League. One of the kids on our team, his older brother was in the military. He was in the army, and he used to eat worms while we were out practicing because with
Oh,
where our field was, we
oh,
had,
come on.
yeah, and he would do it like as a way to like show off, like, yeah, we all had to learn how to do this in the army, and he would do it to kind of like mess with us. But he would eat a worm here or there, and we'd all be like, oh man, oh that's like that kind of thing. So whenever I see this scene, I think of that. I can't picture his face. I can't even remember who on the team's brother it was, but it was just one of those deals that like, yeah, one
So
of those deals. He was
so
back in the army.
you're saying this guy, your friend's brother was essentially Chet from Weird Science, then.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. He kind of was. He was a thinner, taller version of it, and he wasn't quite the meathead level of Chet. But yeah, there was some Chet going on there for sure. But it was I kind of wonder like what the deal was, if it was one of those deals. I think it was one of those situations where they were such a difference in age because he was a lot older. He was like probably in his 20s.
Hmm.
So it might have been one of those deals where, and we would have been like 10, 11, that maybe there was such a disparity in age that maybe the parents had this great idea of like, oh, while you're back on leave from the army, why don't you help out with the Little League team, and you can, bond with your younger brother that you probably have really, because I had a brother that, is 10 years younger than me, and we're better connected now, but at the time, yeah, it probably would have been a similar thing. I never went to the army, but I guess, same idea that like, I don't know what I would have done because I was in college. I didn't eat worms, so I don't know what I
Well,
would have done. Yeah.
speaking of bonding with a brother, though, I mean, here's where I wonder whose idea was this to have eating worms in the movie? Because what we haven't mentioned here yet is that the star of the movie is Ted Pryor. The director or writer of the film is his brother, David
Right.
Pryor.
Yes.
And so it's like, whose idea was it to, was it David's idea? I'm going to make my brother eat a worm in this scene. And he does it for real,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, he's. I think it could be both because I think it was like maybe because Ted Pryor, kind of similar to William Zipp, like he did everything in these movies. So he was again like he would build sets, he would man cameras, things like that. And so I wonder if it was a combination of the brother being like, let's see if I can get him to do this, and Ted Pryor being like, I'll do anything to make this movie. Sure, yeah, let me at it. I'll do it. So yeah, and then of course we see a poor little mouse, or they said it was a rat, but it was a little
it's a
mouse that was
rat.
hanging
Yeah.
out, and he captures that as well off screen, so we don't, they don't want to get any trouble with the ASPCA, and so
I, I mean, that is more appealing, actually. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. The eating of the worm thing is,
yes,
no, it's just disgusting in the way they do it in this movie. When he
yes,
sees the rat slash mouse, I'm like,
yeah,
I could deal with that. I mean, if I was
right.
starving, I could deal with that. But the worm, I don't know.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, it was one of those things like when he says it, even you just know like, oh boy, there's you can't when you Chekhov's he's gonna eat because Hogan says he's gonna find a place to camp and he's gonna get some food and some rest in his system. And when they mention food specifically, it's like, okay, that's coming. Some kind of animal is gonna get it. And
Mhm.
and and you don't expect it to be a worm though, right? Like you probably expect like maybe like some kind of like cuddly small mammal that's kind of hanging around, and maybe he hits it up with a rock off screen, and then the next thing is like the cuddly animal on a spit, right? Kind of
Yeah.
being rolled
Or
around.
even like a bug, a cockroach or something. I
Right?
could deal
Yeah.
with that. With a worm. Ugh.
Yes, it was just, yeah, it was good, but it did give me flashbacks to Little League, yeah. And the funny thing is, I had completely forgotten about that until this scene, and so when I saw it the first time, it reminded me of that, and then again, completely forgot about it completely, and then I see it again, and I'm like, that's right, that happens. And so, yeah. Um, Now, the other flashback that I got here is in the morning, he wakes up to two hillbillies that have him at
Oh, yeah.
gunpoint.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was visiting friends in Bangor, Maine one time, and my bus got in a little early and they were still working. So I went to the park and fell asleep on a bench and woke up to some weird guy looking over me. And it was the most frightening thing ever. And he just came and sat down next to me. I was like, I looked at like my phone or whatever. I was like, I gotta go, and just grab my backpack and got the hell out of there. It's like I can imagine it's a frightening thing to wake up to something like that. So yeah.
We got to talk about the hillbillies here for a second. I
Mhm.
I I actually I referred to them as country bumpkins in my
Yes.
notes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Okay, it is established earlier in the film. Especially, well, it's the guy that Danton was talking to earlier, where he was like, uh, saying, "Oh, I just joined today," type of thing.
Right.
He finds out from that guy that they're 75 miles south of Los Angeles. Okay. So please tell me what hillbillies are living 75 miles southwest of Los Angeles or in California at all. Does California even have hillbillies? I'm kind of thinking not. And I mean, the accent that this guy has, I mean, again, well, it's not a real accent at all, but I don't think anybody in California has an accent quite like this. This is an accent like, he's down in Alabama or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
But then the weirdest thing is after Danton encounters the bumpkins, okay, then a few minutes later, Hogan and his guys encountered the bumpkins, and the accent is completely gone.
Right. Yes. Right. Once they're scared, they're like, yeah, they have no accent. Yeah. Yeah. It was like they were from. It was almost like something out of the Grapes of Wrath or something. Like they were like coming from Oklahoma or something in like the 40s to
Yeah.
California. Right. It was like a period picture kind of thing.
He's even got this weird little hat on, which is
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, so it's like they kind of feel like he's like some kind of vagrant, that Danton's some kind of vagrant who's like eating rats or something, and they just kind of chase him away. And then yeah, when they encounter the mercenaries, the funny thing is when they encounter the mercenaries, they're like they realize they're the bad guys and that Danton might be okay. And so one of them tries to protect Danton. He's like, I'm not telling you where that guy went. And so they shoot him. That's just like that's it. And then the
Yep.
the other hillbilly gets it too. Which again, I think if you're a mercenary group and you're trying to stay under the radar, which I think it's what Donahue tells him, like you're kind of getting a little bit over the edge here. I mean, whatever those hillbillies are into, yeah, murdering them might not have been the best idea. But hey, in this movie, that's it. They
how,
just lie there dead on the ground. That's it.
how under the radar can these guys really be? I
Right?
gotta
Yeah.
wonder because I mean their camp is kind of out in the open.
Yes.
It's not like they're tucked away in the hills or in the forest. It's pretty open space where their camp is. So yeah, anybody flying over, or whatever. I mean, lots of folks have private planes out there in
Yeah.
LA. I'm sure surely they spotted this field where there's tanks and jeeps and
Right.
tents and things. I mean, how secret can it be?
Yeah,
So
no, that's a great point. Because that's the thing, right? Is they make it clear to set it at 75 miles, like the southeast, I guess, because it's inland. But you're right. Even though there's farms and things like that in those areas. I mean, remember, the Bill Maher, Shannon Tweed movie, Cannibal Women of the Avocado Jungle of Death, right? That's
yeah,
supposed to
yeah.
also take place in that same area where they just joke that there's like this massive, avocado like mystical jungle there. So I guess maybe people in LA look at that area as like way, like I guess like the way people in Boston see like Framingham as like way far away. It's like only 20 minutes from Boston, but they see it as like way out there.
Right.
Yeah, maybe people in LA see that they kind of see that whole like inland empire area or whatever. It's just like as those two bumpkins in the woods, right? That's their understanding of them. I mean,
That's
again,
where flyover territory officially begins, right there.
exactly right. Which now we think about this movie potentially being more self-aware. That actually could be like maybe a message or a statement that they were trying to make there. That because you think with A-Team episodes that took place in that part of California, they never had that kind of thing going on. I mean, there were
No,
small
yeah.
towns, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, no.
Well, so our hero is still bumping people off. He's popping out of the grass. He's popping out of the water and pulling people into the water. All kinds of great shots of him just like emerging from things and grabbing people and killing them. But then somehow in the open field area, he encounters Thornton, and Thornton dispatches with him pretty easily for
Yeah.
our hero. And I guess there's supposed to be this idea that he's supposed to be something to overcome later, but it's like total domination. Like I don't think he even gets a hit in on Thornton before he's completely knocked to the ground.
It's a really abrupt change given all the things we've seen. Like you say, I mean, he's taken everything out of the Rambo, the Braddock playbook when it comes to jumping out of water, jumping out of leaves, all that kind of stuff, and also grimacing very effectively every time he does that. But but then yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, well, we got to have him get captured, and
Yeah.
so very quickly the sunglasses guy is able to get control of him here, basically just so we can move things forward a little bit and mix it up and not have the whole movie just be, jumping out from behind a tree and killing people.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, because it does kind of feel like, right, when you get to this point in the movie where it's like about the 45-minute mark, that's like, wow, things are moving pretty quickly here. Like, do they have 45 minutes left of the movie? And then
Yeah.
the sort of sudden thing happens here. And so back at the camp, he's tied to a chair. And that's when Hogan explains his plan that, like, hey, join me. I want you to join my team. I want you
Come
to
to
be a
the
part of
dark
this.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course he says no. Danton says no. So they bring in, I think Thornton comes in to like punch him off screen or whatever. But at the same time, Jamie's father, Cameron Mitchell, has shown up with a large hunting rifle, and he's all right. Does he have the rifle yet, or is he just scouting around? I can't
I think he
remember.
might just be scouting
He's
around
just
at this
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he looks like he could have come from another movie with the coat that he's wearing. That it looks like it's like some kind of safari coat.
It does.
It
That's what I was thinking too. He wears it's the same costume through the whole thing. Cameron Mitchell wears, and it does. It looks like he's going on safari.
Yeah, so I don't. Usually those movies are shot in South Africa, but you wonder if, like, yeah, there was another movie that they were shooting in that same area, and he just kind of was moving between sets at that time.
There's an elephant just off screen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and he's sort of sneaking around. He does encounter one of the baddies. He actually dispatches the guy. I guess that's 27 years on the force. That'll help you dispatch, or 30 years on the force. That'll help you do that. But yeah, while he's doing that, then William Zip, as the mercenary guy, he's starting to kind of get second thoughts, and he's goes in and kind of sees where Danton is. I don't think they actually show him loosening the or cutting the ropes on Danton. But they get cut, and at some point Sybil is interrogating Danton as well. And she's like throwing water on him and stuff like that. And I guess I don't know if this is supposed to be an applause scene or what, but he gets his hands free and he's like, "You bitch!" and he punches her and knocks her out.
Yeah.
It I don't know if that
Well,
was what that.
and this scene is one where I thought, oh, they're missing an opportunity here, because a lot of times in a scene like this, where you've got that lone female member of the group of baddies,
Yeah.
She normally would try to seduce the hero
Yes.
in this scene, and we don't really get this unless you count throwing water on him to be seduction.
Right. Right, exactly. And I guess maybe part of that is like because there's scenes earlier on where Hogan is like ordering her around and stuff, and maybe like she's just so like in love with him and so worried that he would get upset. But you're right, like usually there's a sense of like, right, like whoever that was. I mean, I think of the old Batman cartoon, right? Whoever the woman was that hung out with the baddie in that
Hmm.
episode would a lot of times would try to seduce Batman in some way. Yeah, so yeah, we like you said, we don't get that here. And once he gets himself free, he's on the loose again, and he's he's out there causing problems again.
Problems. This is where that great grenade moment you talked about, or with the grenade in the pants. I think this is that moment,
This is
right?
it. Right. So one of the guys that he encounters kind of has him, at gunpoint or whatever. He grabs a grenade off the guy's belt and puts it in his pants and then runs. And the guy blows up. And then we see like a boot with like smoke coming out of the empty boot, which that was the moment where I was like, is this more self-aware than I thought? Because that just feels like I don't know. I almost kind of feel like if you're being serious, you wouldn't do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, you mentioned Monty Python earlier. I mean, it seriously does look like something you would see in a Python sketch, or like, so you'd see a moment like this in like the Naked Gun movies or something
Right.
like that, where all that's left is the smoking shoes.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, so he goes out, he's out there again, and he is, taking people down. And that's when he meets up with William Zip, and William Zip says, you know what, listen, I'm kind of not sure if I want to be in with these guys. I needed the money. It's better than what do you say? It was better than delivering pack or delivering mail or something. I can't remember what he said. Whatever the job was that he couldn't do, being a soldier is what he wanted to do. But then also while he's out, Ted Pryor's out there. I'm trying to think if I think he kills more people, right? He's kind of doing the more of the bumping off kind of thing. And at
Well,
a
yeah,
certain point,
well, this is where like all the different vehicles start to come into play
that's
as
right.
well, because like, the mercenaries have their camp with all these,
The
there's
tanks.
there's tanks and there's jeeps and all that there. And I think I read a little bit of the trivia and stuff. I think, basically this is like, I don't remember if it was a museum or just a storage yard or something,
Right.
but where a bunch of these type of things are kept. And so they filmed there, to make it look like this well-equipped group of mercenaries or whatever. You were talking earlier about bringing back childhood memories. This brought back some childhood memories for me because where I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, there's a museum. It's a World War I museum. It's called Cantini, and
Mm,
it's basically where it's the former estate of this General McCormick, and so they've got this museum there, and there's these tanks. And always when I was a kid, this is a place you'd go and you'd climb on the tanks, and they're still there, and all that. But so yeah, just seeing a bunch of tanks all lined up here in this place made me think, oh yeah, it looks like it's just a place you come let the kids come crawl around on the tanks type of thing. and,
yeah,
and then all the mercenaries start jumping on board and making it look like they're driving the tanks, but they don't really.
right. Exactly, because you're right. Because in the credit sequence, there's a museum that they give. And they mention in the credits
Oh
a
yeah.
military museum, so that makes perfect sense, and also it makes sense too that like the tanks like fire at him, but they stay
they
stationary, right?
they
Like they
still
don't move.
the turret moves and they fire, but yeah, they don't go anywhere. The Jeeps and the trucks and all that, they got to drive those. But yeah, clearly the production company was not allowed to drive the tanks because they just sit there.
Exactly. So yeah, so he's dodging tank fire and he's throwing grenades at guys and he's shooting at people are showing up and he's like he's I think he's either like disarming them and shooting with their own guns or he's stabbing them with the knives. He's doing some neck breaks. He's kind of doing all kinds of stuff here and he gets
Oh, and there's
away.
a helicopter. We can't, I mean, we got to
Oh,
throw love
that's
to our friend Will Slater here. There's an exploding helicopter in this moment.
yes, he would not be happy if I if I missed that. So yeah, so you're absolutely right because it's like the helicopter's kind of like circling and they kind of give you a good amount of time of that helicopter circling before he finally dispatches it.
And I mean, in all honesty, I mean, Will has trained me well when it comes to looking at the nuances of how helicopters explode in films. And this one, as I watched it, I was like, surely this does not rank anywhere near the upper echelon for Will's criteria, because it's basically we have a shot of the helicopter and then it's just a quick edit to a shot of an explosion. They two are completely unrelated. So clearly they did not actually blow up a helicopter in this movie.
Yeah, I wonder what he gave this movie on Letterboxd because it's interesting when you look at the reviews on Letterboxd here. It's funny how if I look at just my the people that I'm mutuals with, the reviews skew in like the 3.5 4 range. but if you just do everybody, it's like ones and twos mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, he didn't give it any stars. So he must have just thought, okay, I watched it for the exploding helicopter. That was enough for me. But yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, I mean, I think they do the same thing with the tanks, right? Where it's like they go to it looks like he's blowing them up and they have an explosion, but it's like somewhere else. And the
Well, yeah, one of the tanks once he jumps on it, and again, it's not moving. It's like not at all dramatic. If it was moving and you jumped on it, cool. But the tank is just sitting there. He jumps on it, opens the hatch, throws a grenade inside, closes the hatch, and instead of jumping off of it and running away, he stands there and holds the hatch closed. So the explosion is contained inside the tank. So we
right.
really don't see any kind of carnage with that. It's
Yeah.
just okay. I guess it went boom.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, you see a lot of mitigation, right, of their budgetary limitations there here. And so, like you said, with the exploding helicopter, it's like, oh yeah, that's just not, it's with so many movies with great, it's almost like I think there's almost a sense too, kind of they almost like they knew before Will did how many of these movies needed to have exploding helicopters. They were like, no, this is a box we got to check off. We
Right.
can't,
Yeah.
we cannot do it, and they check it off. I mean that because he uses the rocket launcher later. William Zip hands it to him, and I think again we don't quite get the payoff that I think we would have wanted with that with it's like when you see that thing come into a movie, think of like like Invasion USA where Chuck Norris blows up
Oh.
Richard Lynch with it. It's like
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you
Well,
expect the kind of
Invasion
payoff.
USA has. I mean, the payoff is so great with everything in that. I mean,
Mhm.
I love one of the things I love about Invasion USA is the scene where they blow up the neighborhood.
Yes.
The terrorists come in there and they take over this neighborhood and they blow up all the houses. And I love that it's um it was an actual neighborhood outside of Atlanta, and it's actually like it's a neighborhood that they were going to tear down so they could expand some things at the Atlanta airport. And in fact, I think if I read correctly, the where the rental car center is at Atlanta, which I've been there many times and rented cars there, that's where this neighborhood was. And so they were going to demolish all these houses anyway. So they said to the film company, "Yeah, you could blow them up."
That's amazing. So I knew about that part that they were blowing up a real neighborhood in Atlanta. I didn't know that part about the rental car place because I never put two and two together that if they're blowing it up because they're expanding the airport, that there would obviously have to be buildings there where those houses were that were blown up in the movie. That is amazing because you're right. Like I mean, it's like Christmas time. Like the family's like trimming the tree, and then baddies show up with a rocket launcher and just blow up one of the houses.
I need to watch that again this Christmas. Oh my,
Yeah.
I forgot that it was a Christmas movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good. Yeah, it's so fit. I mean, and it's kind of funny because this movie is in the tradition of those kinds of movies. And so it is interesting when we think about it. If you think of it from a standpoint of this movie, if it's being more self-aware, it's almost kind of mocking those things in a way that like Canon wasn't mocking it. Like Canon was just like, no, we're just going to turn it all up to 11
Right,
and let it
right.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with you there. That is it is a fun Christmas one. It is. I mean, I think for my I think you grew up in the 80s, 90s, and that period where it's like consumerism had taken over Christmas to such a degree that yes, it's a family. You don't want to see them getting
Oh
blown up,
yeah.
but it's almost like a figuratively, and especially then when they
Oh,
trash the mall.
I was just gonna say there's a mall scene too. Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's like you could just, if you're gonna make a Black Friday like just tear it all down Christmas movie, that's there's a lot of things in that movie that you could have there for that. Wow. Well, yeah. So at this stage here, now when Danton's gotten away again, first off, Troy Donahue shows up and he's angry about the fact that this whole thing is getting out of control with Danton and all of that, and Hogan kind of tail between his legs, like, okay, I'll get it under control, and then out of nowhere, Donahue is driving back from meeting with Hogan, and Cameron Mitchell has his Jeep or his Suzuki Sidekick or whatever it is he's driving is blocking the road. Donahue gets out. Cameron Mitchell gives him this big speech about you big men using the little people,
Oh,
and then he shoots him.
the speech is amazing. Oh,
Yes,
not in a, and I say amazing, not in a good way. It's
right.
this. it's, uh, again, wondering about how scripted this movie is.
Yeah.
This is a moment where I'm looking at it going, did Cameron Mitchell say, "Oh, I'll come up with something. Give me this big moment. I want a big moment here. I'm gonna really, let the bad guys, have an earful here in this moment." It is a wonderfully ridiculous speech.
It is. It is. And it ends with killing Troy Donahue. It was completely out of nowhere. Like I wasn't seeing any of this coming. Yeah, it's just completely ridiculous. So then
Well,
after
and
this,
how weird is it too that you have, again, talking about these are our two quote unquote names of the movie. I
yeah,
mean, that we have, one of the names take out, the other one,
right.
and, not to jump too far ahead, but, Cameron Mitchell's going to have his moment here, as well.
Right,
But,
yes.
I thought, I don't know how often does the the token old school old Hollywood star get taken out in these movies where they have these glorified cameos essentially.
Well, it is a great point too, because also the fact that they were in the same shot together, because a lot
Right.
of times these glorified cameos, they're
Oh yeah.
completely being filmed at different times, and I mean, to be honest, I don't know how much they were in the same shot together either. They may not have actually been in the same shot. I can't remember if they actually had a scene together, if it
I
was
think
just
they are. I think
okay.
there's a wider shot where we see them both together there, but I mean it lingers on Mitchell staring right into the camera and having his big speech moment.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that just sort of comes out of where we have that death, and then we kind of get the all the pieces coming together for our denouement here. So Hogan talks to Thornton. Thornton says, "Hey, I know where Danton lives. I can go get his wife." And of course, Cameron Mitchell 30 years on the force didn't think to tell his daughter, "Hey, why don't you come stay at my place for a while? It's probably not safe for you here because they kidnapped your husband here, so they know where he lives. This is probably not the place." He's like, "No, stay inside, lock the doors, and don't let anybody in."
Yeah, that's the
Well,
thing. He tells her in that earlier scene that we talked about how awkward it is. He's like,
yeah,
now this is the most important thing.
right,
You need to lock the doors. Okay.
right,
Just make sure you lock the doors.
right.
And so I mean they're clearly setting this up for later, but you're absolutely right. It's like the wiser thing would have been like, do you have a friend's house you could go to? Maybe something like that. Let me
Yeah,
drive you there, even.
right, right. Just give me the number for that place, and I'll call you if I hear
Or
anything. And that's
Or even, he talks about his buddies on the force and they owe him
right.
favors. He should have taken her to one of his buddies' houses.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But no, she's just sitting there waiting to get taken, and of course she does. So Thornton kidnaps her, and then Cameron Mitchell, after killing Donahue, decides to do some more reconnaissance. He gets caught. After I think he dispatches one of the baddies while he's out there. He kills one of the mercenaries, but he gets caught by some more. Oh, because right, he's investigating. He's like trying to get stuff off the guy, like I guess get clues about who these baddies are. He's like rifling through the guy's pockets, and then looks up to like 3 or 4 machine gun barrels in his face.
Well, and he says to that one guy, he says something like friend or foe. And it's like,
Right,
dude, they're all foes.
right,
Okay. It's a
exactly.
band of mercenaries out there. You don't need to ask.
Yes, and when the guy goes friend, he's like, "You're a bad liar," and he kills him. Yeah, exactly. So when Susan, oh sorry, when Jamie gets taken to the to Hogan's place, we get probably the scene in the movie that would make it difficult if you were going to have like a fun movie night
Mhm.
with a bunch of people watching this, because Hogan rapes Suzanne Tara with Jamie, the Jamie character. Um, Probably not necessary. Probably could have gotten away with not doing that. I know a lot of 80s action movies did that kind of trope of like the wife getting sexually assaulted in some way, and then the hero like avenging her, I guess. Kickboxer's one that comes up to mind that is that, but it was probably the one scene in the movie that was like, boy, this is too much.
Yeah. It is definitely unnecessary. Um, it's I don't want to say it lingers, but it does kind of stay on it a little longer than it should,
Yeah,
even to give the idea of what's happening.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it is like you say, it is the one moment of this movie that kind of moves it beyond kind of just that, oh, I'm going to sit down with a fun, cheesy movie thing. I mean, like that's the scene that would be cut out if they were doing it on like MSD3K, because, how do you, how do you riff on this moment,
Exactly. I remember they tell that story about side hackers where they had all this stuff planned to do that movie, and then they discover that when Ross Hagen's wife gets killed, it's a horrible like rape and murder scene, and they're like, we have to take this whole chunk out of the movie, and then I guess they had to do a short or something. But it was like one of those things where they discovered like, oh, geez, yeah, we can't do that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that happens, and then Cameron Mitchell is brought into the same tent that the daughter's being held in, and she tells him like, oh, he raped me, and so then Cameron Mitchell goes to strangle Hogan, and as he's strangling him, he gets shot. Right, Hogan shoots him in the stomach after his baddies pull Cameron Mitchell off him, and I don't know if you noticed this, it looked like he reacted to being shot before the sound of the shot went off.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and it's weird too because I thought that Mitchell was going to maybe have another speechifying moment here. I
Yeah.
mean, considering what he did with Troy Donahue a few moments ago, you'd think that, we just find out that they've assaulted his daughter. I mean, surely he's going to, give him an earful at this moment, but he really doesn't.
No, he just goes to try to strangle him. He's dead. And then Danton gets back to his house. So somehow he makes it 75 miles
Yeah.
back to his house. We don't know if he stole it. Maybe he stole the van with the cracked window. I don't know how, but somehow he's back. But Sybil's waiting for him there. And she's like, "Hey, the phone rings. Oh, hey, it's for you." And so it's like, "Okay, just happened to know you were back at that time." And he called the house, or maybe, I guess, I mean, it could have been right that Hogan was just calling every 10 minutes, right? And just, she was just dealing. He's not back yet. No, no. Oh,
Oh, yep.
it's for you. There we go. And that's when Danton finds out that they have his wife. That he, if he wants to, if he wants her to stay alive, he's got to turn himself into Sybil and have them bring him to there. And he kind of makes it sound like he's going to maybe be amenable to it, and then he just kills Sybil after he gets off the phone. He just
Yeah, that was a weird moment too.
Yeah.
Again, I was trying to think, uh, do we does it happen often where we have again our big leading man guy, our Arnold, our Sly, whatever, taking out the female version, member of the band of baddies. I mean, or a lot of times if it does happen, it's more of an accident. Like again, I'm trying to go back to past shows we've done, but there was the female baddie in Cracker Jack 2, and I want to say wasn't her demise more accidental? I'm trying
I
to
think the
remember.
baddie killed her. I think the
Oh,
baddie killed
okay.
her so he could have all the money.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But I mean, point being that, you don't usually have the hero take
Right.
out the lady. I mean, she's a bad guy, yes, but she's still a lady. But here he
Right.
just whips out the gun, guns her down.
Right, right. After punching her in the face earlier in the movie, and you're right. Like usually, like that's part of the reason why the wife is usually there, is that the wife might fight the second in command, or like you said, or like you were talking about, like maybe the baddie will decide, like, listen, I love you, but sorry, you got to go, yeah, that kind of thing. You're
Well,
right.
like
Like,
you were talking about Superman movies earlier.
yeah,
Like you mentioned that always makes me think of when Ursa gets taken out in Superman 2 as it's Lois Lane. She
right,
goes, you know what? You're a pain in the neck. And she
right,
punches her and she falls into the deep cavern of the Fortress of Solitude. You don't have,
yeah,
the heroic guy kill the girl.
right.
You know,
Yeah, can you imagine that if that was Clark Kent, like, or if that was Superman, like uppercutting her and she goes flying, like,
right.
you'd be like, God, that's too much. It was
Mhm.
one thing when she had the same superpowers that he had, and she was fighting him. But you're right, like yeah, that it wouldn't have played well. Yeah, it wouldn't have
Mhm.
worked. But yeah, they did it here. And then he goes into his gun cabinet and he starts pulling all his weapons, and that's where it's like we get all the blades, we get the dynamite that's wrapped in, in tape that again looks like something out of Merry Melodies or something like that. Yeah, all the guns and everything, and he just loads up and again makes it 75 miles back to where all this stuff is happening. That's when he comes across William Zip. William Zip says, "Hey, I'm here. I'm on your team. I'll help you." They rescue the wife. They get her out, And I think that's when the grenade in the tank scene happens, because she's like kind of hiding in those areas. He stashes her in a cave so he can take out more baddies. And of course that never works well, right? So she gets
Hmm.
captured. William Zip, initially when she's captured, they bring her to Hogan, where Hogan looks like he's going to assault her again, or no, he's going to kill her. And William Zip saves her. But he just kind of shoots Hogan in the arm, and then Thornton shows up and kills William Zip. And he's got Suzanne. He's got Jamie at gunpoint when when Danton shows up. And this was a shock to me as well. I don't know what you thought here, that Thornton has his gun pointed at her, and we think like he's going to save her in the nick of time, but he doesn't.
Well, yeah, and I mean, he's got plenty of opportunity too. That's the thing is like he comes running up. He's got a machine gun in his hand,
Yeah,
and he sees it, the setup happening, and he screams, "No!"
right.
And it's like, dude, if you stop running, take a second, aim. You could take this guy out. We've already seen your skills throughout the
Right.
film. I think he would have been able to do it. But yeah, this is a scene where you have a very predictable moment because William Zip, I mean, the buddy's not going to make it.
No,
You know
right.
that from the beginning. Once we have a guy who's, a part of the mercenary group and he decides, all right, I'm not down for this anymore. I'm going to help out Danton. He's not going to make it to the end of the movie. Okay? So when he gets taken out here, you're like, okay, that, check that off. I knew that was going to happen. But when they take out the wife, it's like, wait a second, that's not supposed to happen.
Oh, right. And I also feel like it's a little bit like rough in the sense that like, she went through all of this stuff, and it's like she goes through all of this stuff just to die after. It's like that's a
Mhm.
pretty rough like last like 10 hours of her
Right.
life. For
Yeah.
for a movie like this, it's definitely rough stuff. And yeah, but I guess it's supposed to be the thing that like makes Danton inspired to do what he's about to do next, which is the Monty Python scene we were teasing earlier in the film. He comes at Thornton with a machete, and he hacks and takes off one of his arms right below the shoulder, and then he grabs said arm and starts beating him with it.
It's glorious. It's glorious. I mean, it sounds a lot more graphic than it really is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's literally like, lobs it off, you've got rubber stump, and all that,
Right.
you don't have blood gushing everywhere or things like that. I mean, it's not bloody at all. I don't think there's
No,
a drop
right.
of blood that gets shed. I mean, it's like this machete's got the qualities of a lightsaber. It cauterizes the wound right away,
Yes.
you know.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, just the idea that he picks up the arm and starts pummeling the guy with his own arm is, I mean, that's what you watch these kind of movies for.
Exactly. It's beautiful. Right. Right. It's like the only blood actually comes on Thornton's like nose and mouth when he's getting beaten with his own arm.
Hmm.
That's right. That's where the blood comes from. And he does. He just beats him. And then he scalps him. Which was
That was out of left field too. I mean, geez.
yeah. Yeah, it was a rough, because I think I mean, again, I don't know how well, unless you're doing a historical picture of the 19th century Western expansion or whatever. Like, unless you're doing something like that, I don't think you could do that kind of thing in a movie nowadays. Like, it would just
Well,
wouldn't.
yeah, and I mean, it seems, I don't know. I would have expected something like that if like we'd had something earlier in the movie that had been like, where Hogan's talking about how he trained this guy. If we had
Mhm.
seen that being, part of like Hogan's whole repertoire of things,
Yeah.
or, saying something like, oh, I based, my, our war skills on the traditions of this ancient tribe, or so I mean, that terribly politically incorrect to go into that type of thing right now, I
No, right.
guess. But if there had been something that made us kind of give some context for that, but it seems completely just weird and gratuitous, that it happens here.
Yeah. No, you make a great point, because I think Apache knife fighting is actually part of Army training. I think they usually have someone from the Apache Nation who trains soldiers in knife fighting. So that actually, you could have actually had a basis in that. Like, but I mean, yes, I totally agree too. I can't imagine this movie would have done it in a way that would have been like, would have aged well or would have been, but would have looked good. But yeah, it could, like you said, it was just sort of comes out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, there's no Chekhov's anything for this, right? It's just he just does it, and then he throws the scalp at Hogan's feet, and Hogan's like, "Oh boy, that's it. I guess I'm in trouble here." And that's when we get kind of the funny ending here, where he's just like, like, take off your shirt, and oh, go Cap, take off your shoes, and then he's like, and run, and he's like, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. And technically, Hogan, if you know that like he's going to kill you, you don't have to do this. You could have just not run, but no,
Yeah.
he goes, and then we get the Ted Pryor end scene of him just like leaning back and yelling with his arms up in the air.
Well, and Hogan, I mean, talk about an abrupt character shift here as well. I mean, he just completely turns into a quivering ball of goo at this
Yes.
point, and I would have expected a little bit more of a, moment. I mean, supposedly these two guys knew each other. One was
Yeah.
trained by the other. He could, this whole could have been, you disappoint me, Danton, or, this whole kind of thing, something to indicate there's some kind of a dynamic between these two, but it just becomes basically repeating the moment from the beginning, don't kill me type of a thing.
Yes. Right, exactly. That's exactly, yeah, exactly. You're right, because there would have been normally, like in this kind of movie, you're right. It would have been something like like you disappoint me, or like, oh, you were one of my best. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, or yeah, anything like that. And instead, he's just like, don't do this. You can't do this. And
Yeah, or
right.
even like come on, Danton, we can do this together. Your skills, my brains.
Right.
We can rule this whole country, man. And
Right, exactly, right. He could even be like, oh, with Donahue out, we can do. I guess it would have been Michelson, but with Michelson out, we can do. Yeah, you're right. Like none of that stuff happens. It's just take off your shirt, take off your shoes, and run.
run.
And so then then he does the big yell, and then I mean the song at the end, we get a nice like 80s like I 80s like rock hit, or not hit, I shouldn't say hit, but definitely what it was called, Never Say Die, which I think those guys, I think Steve McClintock, I think he's done other stuff for AIP. I think he does the song at the end of Space Mutiny, which because that's the same company as this, that with the guys in MST3K make fun of.
I love any attempt at having a hit song in a movie. I actually, on my Facebook page all summer long, have been sharing different songs from 80s movies, because I'm just endlessly fascinated by songs from 80s movies. But it's especially fun when these movies that were never going to be hits try to do these songs in their films. It's it's just so wonderful. The 80s was a great time for movies. It was a great time for music. And both the good things about that and the bad things about that all have their charms. So,
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I can confirm that actually it was. He did do the Space Mutiny song that they were making fun of, and so because I mean I remember when Joel and the bots, or actually Mike and the bots, when the bots were making fun of Mike, they're blaming him for the bad, the music, and it's like it would have continued to be the 70s if it wasn't for you and all. You're right. It's like it's one of those parts of movies that especially with these lower budget ones, like now modern lower budget ones, it's modern rock that they do, and it's a lot of times they'll use the same songs over and over again, and there's like a charm in having a movie end with the credits with this kind of song here, that like you said, it harkens back to like the good 80s soundtrack songs when it's not, but it still works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Gotta love it.
yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. I guess we're kind of, now that we've hit the credits here, and we did get our New York Seltzer credit as well, just in case people were wondering, that was in there as well. But yeah, any other thoughts on this movie, Tom, before we wrap up?
Well, one thing I got to throw out, and I haven't actually watched this yet, but it's interesting to know that apparently Hogan survives this film, even though it's set up that he makes him run and that Danton's going to chase him down. But There's a sequel to this. There's a 2013 sequel that has our original people coming back. Ted Pryor's back as Mike Danton, and David Campbell's back as Hogan. So apparently he survived, and we get to do it all over again. I haven't watched it yet. It's on Tubi from what I saw. So I guess we can put that one down on the watch list here for soon.
Yes, I haven't seen it either. So, because Bulletproof covered this movie recently as well, and I was sharing it on Instagram, and Obey Feline, Instagram account who follows the podcast and the blog, he messaged me and said, "Hey, have you seen Deadliest Prey yet?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." He's like, you got to see it, you got to watch it. So apparently it's fun. It's a fun sequel to this. So it'd be interesting to note. And I mean, the other thing too I forgot is that his character is supposed to be a Vietnam War vet. And he was born in 1959, so he would have been 14 for the last year.
I wondered about that. I was like, because they mentioned Vietnam, there's something about, oh yeah, you helped me back in Nam. And I was like, okay, wait, how old is this guy?
Yeah.
This is 87. Okay, I don't think this is adding up.
No, exactly. So yeah, so that's it. So they keep talking about him being a Vietnam War vet in this, and he was definitely too young for that.
See, that's playing into those things we were talking about with all those other movies. I mean, when you look at Rambo, you look at Missing in Action. Part of the whole gimmick of those movies is that these guys are Vietnam vets, and part of it also is the idea of it's it's a Rambo line, I think, where it's, do we get to win this time? It's the idea of
Yeah.
kind of the redemption for what went wrong when they were in Nam or whatever.
No, that's a really great point, right? And so even if he's too young to be a Vietnam War vet, they felt like they had to make him a Vietnam War vet to be able to fit the paradigm with that, with, like you said, with like with Rambo, and some of the other ones that you get in those. And so yeah, because it's not like it's that far away in 87. It's like, I think, the Fall of Saigon might have been 73, I think, or I can't remember when I think that's when the official like end of U.S. involvement in the war was 73. So you're only talking like 14 years after that, but it's like these guys would have had, the youngest ones would have been in their late 30s. And yeah, definitely Dan was not in his late 30s. If he was supposed to be in his late 30s and he's a teenager having trouble getting up out of the waterbed, that's
He took his waterbed with him to Nam,
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Todd, as we're wrapping up here, anything you want to plug?
Oh, well, yeah, I'll never turn down an opportunity to plug my podcast. The Forgotten Filmcast is my show, and we're releasing new episodes all the time. Try to do one pretty much every week, though I do take a break every now and then. But we cover all kinds of different movies, all kinds of different eras and genres of things. I mean, we mentioned a few recent ones. You mentioned that we did Cuffs as a recent show. We mentioned The Pit. A recent one that we did was Man's Best Friend, which is a monster dog movie from the 90s with Ali Sheedy and Lance Henriksen. So there's always cool stuff showing up on there, new stuff to discover. Matt was on a recent show where we did King of the Mountain, which was a movie with Harry Hamlin and Dennis Hopper, racing cars in LA. So yeah, we love to just examine the full spectrum of movies out there that have kind of faded from memory. So the website for that is forgottenfilmcast.wordpress.com. You'll find the shows on all your different favorite podcatchers. I'm on X at Forgotten Films. It's films with a Z. We've got a Facebook group as well. So yeah, check out all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and I'll have the link to the word to the website in the description of the podcast. But definitely, yeah, like and subscribe. I think it's I always enjoy it. Like I said, it's been more fascinating to do. Like you said, like Man's Best Friend was another one that I didn't see, but I remember it in the theater, and it has been kind of fascinating to. Because again, more of them, the ones that are older ones, it's like I may remember them being on TV or something, but they make more sense as Forgotten Films. And it's been fascinating to see these ones from the 90s where I'm like, oh yeah, I can see how that happened, how they became a Forgotten Film.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things too, I that is a great thrill for me with my show is that I always try to have a lot of different folks as guests from lots of different blogs and podcasts and authors and folks that just have a wide range of different perspectives on things. So that's why I'm always thrilled when I discover shows like this one. I just I love to search through and find new podcasts, and I discovered this show and just opened up a line of communication with Matt and was like, hey, let's get you on my show and all that. And so now it's been a thrill to be on this show many times. And, I love, building community of those of us that love to, get on our own little corner of the internet and talk about movies. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing I do love about your show, because one of the things with my show is I fall into a niche where a lot of my guests are kind of roughly around the same age, so like from late 60s, early 70s to like mid 80s. But you have some like younger guests on as well, and it's always been interesting to see kind of how they perceive movies, because a lot of my guests we kind of all come up in a similar vein of how TV movies, all those kinds of things kind of come together. For younger audience, it's kind of interesting to hear, like, if they grew up kind of more in the 90s, they don't really remember the 80s, or their perspectives can be really unique. I know Will Exploding Helicopter also has younger guests on sometimes, and I always love to hear that perspective. It's a little bit different.
yep. There's so many movies out there to enjoy. We movie fans stick together.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, maybe that's a great place to leave it. So thank you, Todd, for coming on. This was another fun conversation.
Always a pleasure. Looking forward to whatever the next one we look at is. It's always a lot of fun. So
Yeah, same here. Yeah, we've got, like you said, there's a ton of stuff out there. So there's definitely something that we'll find for the next one. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.